again, welcome back. Sorry, my cats are being a little insane. Maestro, what are you doing? Yeah, that was Maestro. Snockings has decided that she wants to be in my lap, but yeah, there she is. I'm wearing my independent bookstore day shirt. You can see that was from last year. I work in an independent bookstore, and yeah, it's a really fun thing that happens every last Saturday of every April. It started in California probably about 5 or 6 years. It was the California Bookstore Day for 2 years, and then the rest of the country adopted it, and it became Store Day. The shirt for this year's I'll wear later on. I'll show you that. Yeah, it's fun. It's just for independent bookstores. There's exclusive merchandise that is only available at the brick and mortar stores on the day. They're not allowed to sell it online. You won't find Amazon or Barnes and Nobles or eBay or anything like that. And it's really great support from a lot of the authors. They really support their. Anyways, enough about that. I'll talk about it later on, maybe another day. Anyways, let's get straight into the Secret Garden. So this is oh my goodness, sorry about that. Chapter 6, there was someone crying, there was. The next day the rain poured once again, and when Mary looked out of her window the moor was almost hidden by gray mist. There could be no going out today. What do you do in your cottage when it rains like, Martha? Try to keep from under each other's feet, mostly, Martha asked. Hey, there does seem to be a lot of us then. Mother's a good-natured woman, but they're moithered. The biggest ones go out in the cow shed and play, and he doesn't mind the wet. He goes out just the same as if the sun was shining. He says he sees things on rainy days as doesn't show when it's fair weather. He once cub half drowned in its hole, and he brought it home in the bosom of his shirt, and its mother had been killed nearby, and the hole was swung. The rest of the litter was dead. He's got it at home now. He drowned young crow another time, and he brought it back home too and tamed it. Its name's So Black, and it hops and it flies about with him everywhere. The time Harry had forgotten to resent Martha's familiar talk. She had even begun to find it interesting when she stopped or went away. The stories she had been told by her ayah when she lived in India had been quite unlike those Martha had to tell about the moorland child, 14 people who lived in 4 little rooms and never had quite enough to eat. They seemed to tumble about and amuse themselves like a litter of rough, good-natured cubs. Mary was most attracted by the mother and Dickon. When Martha told stories of what Edward did, they always sounded comfortable. If I had a raven or a fox cub, I could play, said Mary, but I have nothing. Martha looked perplexed. Can thou knit? No, answered Mary. Can thou sew? No. Can thou read? Yes. Then why doesn't thou read something, or learn a bit of spelling? That's old enough to be learning the book a good bit now. I haven't any books, said Mary. Those I had were left in India. Oh, that's a pity, said Martha. If Mrs. Medlock let thee go, there's thousands of books there. Mary did not ask where the library was, because she was inspired by a new idea. She made up her mind to go and find it herself. She was Mrs. Medlock. Mrs. Medlock seemed always to be in her comfortable housekeeper's sitting room. In this queer place one scarcely ever saw anyone at all. There was no one to see but the servants, and when their master was away, luxurious life below stairs, where there was a huge kitchen hung abang brass and pewter, and a large servants' hall where there were 4 or 5 abundant meals a day, and where a great deal of lively romping went on when Mrs. Medlock was away. Mary's meals were served regularly, and Martha waited on her, but that was about her in the least. Mrs. Medlock came and looked at her every day or two, but hired what she did or told her what to do. She supposed that perhaps this was the English way of treating children. In India, she had always been attended by her ayah, who had followed her, waited on her hand and foot. She had often been tired of her company. Now she was nobody and was learning to dress herself because Martha looked as though she thought she was silly and stupid when she was handed to her and put on. "Hasn't that good taste, sense?" she said when Mary had stood waiting for her to put on her gloves for her. "Our Susan Ann is twice thee and has only 4 year old. Sometimes thou looks fair soft." Mary had worn her contrary scowl for an hour after that, with several entirely new things. She stood at the window for about 10 minutes when Martha had swept up the hearth for the last time and gone downstairs. For the new idea which had come to her when she heard the library. She did not care very much herself, but she had read very few because she had read very few books. But to hear back to her mind the 100 rooms with closed doors, she wondered if they locked, and what she would find if she could get into any of them. Were there really? Why shouldn't she go and see how many doors she could count? It would be something to do when she could not go out. She had never been taught to ask permission to do things, and she knew about authority, so she would not have thought it necessary to ask Mrs. Medlock if she was about the house, even if she had seen her. She opened the door of the room and went into it, and then she began her wanderings. It was a long corridor, and it branched into other corridors and long, short flights of steps, which mounted to others again. There were doors and pictures on the walls. Sometimes they were pictures of dark, curious landscapes, but portraits of women and men in queer, grand costumes, made of satin and velvet, and herself in one long gallery whose walls were covered with these portraits. She had never thought of many in any house. She walked slowly down this place and stared at the faces who would stare at her. She felt as if they were wondering what a little girl from India was. Some were pictures of children, little girls in thick satin frocks reached to their feet and stood out about them, and boys with puffed sleeves and lace-cut hair, or with big ruffs around their neck. She always stopped to look at the children, what their names were, and where they had gone, and why they wore such odd clothes. A stiff, plain little girl, rather like herself. She wore green brocade, and held a green parrot on her finger. Her eyes had a sharp, curious look. "You live now," said Mary aloud to her. "I wish you were here." No girl ever spent such a queer morning. It seemed as if there was no one in all the ring house but her own small self, wandering about upstairs and down, through narrow and wide ones, where it seemed to her that no one but herself had ever walked. Many rooms had been built, people must have lived in them, but it all seemed so empty that she could not believe it true. It was not until she climbed to the second floor that she thought of turning the handle of the door. All the doors were shut, as Mrs. Medlock had said they were, but at last she put her hand on one of them and turned it. She was almost frightened for a moment when she felt that it turned without difficulty. When she pushed open the door itself, it slowly and heavily opened. It was a map opened into a big bedroom. There were embroidered hangings on the wall, and inlaid furniture he had seen in India stood about the room. A broad window with leaded panes looked on the moor, and over the mantel was another portrait of the stiff, plain little girl, who seemed to more curiously than ever. "Perhaps she slept here once," said Mary. "She makes me feel queer." After that she opened more doors and more. She many rooms that she became quite tired and began to think that there must be 100 of them. In all of them there were old pictures or old tapestries with strange scenes. There were curious pieces of furniture and curious ornaments in nearly all of them, which looked like a lady's sitting room. The hangings were all embroidered velvet, and in a cabinet 100 little elephants made of ivory. They were of different sizes, and some had mahouts or palanquins on their backs. Some were much larger than the others, and some were so tiny that they seemed only babies. Mary carved ivory in India, and she knew all about elephants. She opened the door of the cabinet and stood and played with these for quite a long time. When she got tired, she set the elephants in order of the cabinet. In all her wanderings through the long corridors and the empty rooms, seeing nothing alive, but in this room she saw something. Just after she had closed the cabinet, there was a tiny rustling sound. It made her jump and look around at the sofa by the fireplace. It seemed to come. In the corner of the sofa there was a cushion, and in the velvet which there covered it there was a hole, and out of the hole peeped a tiny head with a pair of frightened. Mary crept softly across the room to look. The bright eyes belonged to a little grouse that had eaten a hole into the cushion and made a comfortable nest there. 6 baby mice were cuddled up asleep near her. If there was no one else alive in the 100 rooms, there were 7 mice lonely at all. If they wouldn't be so frightened, I would take them back. She had wandered about long enough to feel too tired to wander any further. 2 or 3 times she lost her way by turning down the wrong corridor, and was obliged to ramble on until she found the right one. But at last she reached her own floor again, though she was some room and did not know exactly where she was. I believe I have taken a wrong turning, she said, standing still at what seemed the end of a short passage with tapestry on the wall. I don't know which way to go. How still everything is. It was while she was standing there, and after she had said this, that the stillness was broken by a sound. It was another cry, but not one she had heard that night. It was only a short one, a fretful child, chiding, muffled by passing through walls. It's nearer than it was, said Mary, rather faster, and it is crying. She put her hand accidentally on the tree near her, and then sprang back, feeling quite startled. The tapestry was the covering of the door open, and showed her that there was another part of the corridor behind it, and Mrs. Medlock was humming a bunch of keys in her hand and a very cross look on her face. What are you doing here? She said, by the arm and pulled her away. What did I tell you? I turned wrong and found the wrong corner, Mary. I didn't know which way to go. I heard someone crying. She quite Medlock at that moment, but she hated her more than that. You didn't hear anything of the sort, he said. You came along back to your you come along back to your own nursery, box your ears. And she stood and she took her by the arm and pushed her. Half pushed her up one passage and down another until she pushed her in at the door of her own room. Now, she said, you stay where you're told to stay, or you'll find yourself locked up. Better get you a governess, same as he said he would. You're one that needs someone to look. I've got enough to do. She went out of the room and slammed the door after her, and Mary on the hearthrug, pale with rage. She did not cry, but ground her teeth. There was, she said to herself. She had heard it twice now, and sometimes she would find out. She had found out a great deal this morning, as if she had been on a long journey. At any rate, she had had something to amuse her all, and she had played with the ivory elephants, and had seen the grain mouse and its babies in her nest in the Chapter 7. The Key of the Garden. After this, when Mary opened her eyes, she sat upright in bed immediately and called to Martha. More! Look at the more! The rainstorm had ended, and the gray mist and clouds had been swept away by the wind. The wind itself had ceased, and a brilliant, deep blue sky arched high over. Never had Mary dreamed of a sky so blue. The India was hot and blazing. This was of a deep, cool blue, which almost seemed to sparkle like the water of a bottomless lake. And here and there, high in the arch of blueness, clouds of snow-white fleece. The far-reaching world of the moor itself looked, instead of gloomy, purple-black, or awful dreary gray. Aye, said a cheerful grin. The storm is over for a bit. It does look like this at the time of the year. It goes off in a night like it was pretending it had never been here and never been. That's because the springtime's on its way. It's a long way off yet, but it's coming. Perhaps it always rains or looked dark in England, Mary said. No, said Martha, on her heels among her black lead brushes. Sort. What does that mean? Asked Mary seriously. In India, the native dialects which only a few people understood, so she was not surprised when Martha used words she did not know. Martha laughed as she had done the first morning. There now, she said, I talk again like Mrs. Medlock and said I mustn't. Not of the sort means nothing of the sort, slowly and carefully, but it takes so long to say it. Yorkshire is the sixth on earth when it's sunny. I told thee that'd be the more after that'd see ya. Oh my goodness. I told thee that like the more after a bit. Wait till you see the gold-colored gorse blossoms and the blossoms bloom and the heather flowering, all purple bells and hundreds of butterflies fluttering and hammering and skylarks soaring up and singing. You'll want to out on it in sunrise and live out on it all day like. Could I ever get there? Asked Mary wistfully, looking through her window's far-off blue. It was so new and big and wonderful and such a heavenly color. Answered Martha. Thou's never used the legs since thou was born, it seems to me. That could now, it's 5 mile to our cottage. I should like to see your cottage. Martha stared at her a moment before she took up her polishing brush and began to rub the grate again. She was thinking her plain face did not quite look as sour at this moment as it had in the first morning. It looked just a trifle like little Susan Ann's when she wanted something very much. I'll ask my mother about it, she said. She's one of them that nearly always sees things. It's my day out today, and I'm going home. I am glad. Mrs. Mother, mother. Perhaps you could talk to her. I like your mother, said Mary. I should think that I did, Martha, polishing away. I've never seen her, said Mary. No, that hasn't, replied Martha. She sat up on her heels again and rubbed the end of her nose with the back of her hand, as it puzzled for a moment. But she ended quite positively. Well, she's that sensible and hard-working and clean that no one could help liking her whether they'd seen her or not. On home to her on my day out, I'll just jump for joy when I'm crossing the moor. I like Mary, and I've never seen him. Well, said Martha stoutly, I told us very birds like him, and the rabbits, and wild sheep, and ponies, and the foxes. I wonder, staring at her reflectively, what Dickon would think of thee? Said Mary in her stiff, cold little way. No one does. Martha looked reflective again. Like thyself, she inquired, really quite as if she were curious to know. Mary had a minute thought it over. Not at all, really, she answered, but I never thought of that before. Martha, as if at some homely recollection. Mother said that to me once. She was at her watch, and that doesn't like this one, and that doesn't like that one. What does thou like thyself? It made me laugh, and it brought me to my senses in a minute. She went away in high spirits as soon as she had given Mary her breakfast. She was 5 miles across the moor to the cottage, and she was going to help her mother with the washing and do the week's bake herself thoroughly. Mary felt lonelier than ever when she knew no longer in the house. She went out into the garden as quickly as possible, and the first thing she did was run round the fountain flower garden 10 times. She counted carefully, and when she had finished, she felt in better spirits. The sunshine made the whole place, the high, deep blue sky, arched over Misselthwaite as well more, and she kept lifting her face and looking up into it, trying to she would like to lie down on it, on one of the little snow-white clouds and float about to the first kitchen garden and found Ben Weatherstaff working there with 2 other gardeners. The chair seemed to have done him good. He spoke to her of his own accord. "It's coming," he said. "Kinda that smell it." Mary sniffed and thought she could. "Nice and fresh and damp," she said. "That's good rich earth," he answered, digging away. "It's in a good humor making ready to grow things. It's glad when planting times come. Dull in the winter when it's got naught to do. In the flower gardens out there, they stirring down below in the dark. The sun's warming 'em. You'll see bits of sticking out of the black earth after a bit." "What will they be?" asked Mary. "Crocuses, ruffs, and daffodillies. Has I never seen them?" "No, everything green after the rains in India," said Mary. "And I think things grow up in a night." "Don't grow up in a night," said Weatherstaff. "Thou'll have to wait for 'em. They'll poke up a little higher here and push out a spike more there and uncurl there and another that. You watch 'em." "I'm going to," answered Mary. Very soon rustling flights of wings again, and she knew at once that the robin had come again. He was lively and hopped about so close to her feet and put his head on one side and looked slyly that she and asked Ben Weatherstaff a question. "Remembers me?" she said. "Remember thee?" Ben Weatherstaff said indignantly. "He's cabbage stump in the garden, let alone the people. He's never seen a little wench here before, and he's been out all about thee. There's no need to try to hide anything from him." "Down below in the dark in that garden where he lives?" Mary inquires. "What garden?" grunted Weather surly again. "The one where the old rose trees are?" She could not help asking, so much to know. "Are all the flowers dead, or do some of them come again in the spring? Are there ever any roses?" "Ask him," said Ben Weatherstaff, hunching it toward the robin. "He's the only one as knows. No one else has seen inside it. 10 years was a long time, Mary thought. She had 10 years ago. She walked away, slowly thinking. She had begun to like the garden shed, to like the robin and Dickon and Martha's mother. She was beginning to like Martha, too. Many people to like when you were not used to liking. She thought of the robin as one of the people. She went to her walk outside the long ivy over which she could see the tree tops, and the second time she walked up, interesting and exciting things happened to her, and it was all through Ben Weatherstaff's robin. She heard a chirp and a twitter, and when she looked at the bare flower bed at her left side, about and pretending to peck things out of the earth to persuade her that he had followed her, and the surprise so filled her with delight that she almost trembled a little. "You do remember me," she cried. "You do! You're prettier than anything else in the world." She chirped and talked and coaxed, and he hopped and fluttered his tail and twittered. It was as if his red waistcoat was like satin, and he puffed his tiny breast out and was so fine and so pretty that it was really as if he were showing her how important and like a human person could be. Mistress Mary forgot that she had ever been contrary in her life to draw closer and closer to him, and bend down and talk and try to make something like Robin. Oh, to think that he really should actually let her come as near to him as that! Nothing in the world would make her put out her hand toward him or startle him in the least way. He knew it because he was a real person, only nicer than any other. She was so happy that she scarcely dared to breathe. The flower bed was not quite. It was bare of flowers because the perennial plants had been cut down for their winter rest, all shrubs and low ones which grew together in the back of the bed, and as the robin hopped him, she saw him hop over a small pile of freshly turned up earth. He stopped on it to look for a worm. The earth had been turned up because a dog had dig up a mole, and he had scratched quite a deep hole. Mary looked at it, not really the hole was there, and as she looked, she saw something almost buried in the newly turned soil, like a ring of rusty iron or brass, and when the robin flew up into a tree near, she put out her hand and picked the ring up. It was more than a ring, however, a key which looked as if it had been buried a long time. Mistress Mary stood up at it with an almost frightened face as it hung from her fingers. "Perhaps it is for 10 years," she said in a whisper. "Perhaps it is the key to the garden." Chapter The Robin Who Showed the Way. She looked at the key quite a long. She turned it over and over and thought about it. As I had said before, she was not a child trained to ask permission or consult her elders about things. All she thought about the key was that it key to the closed garden, and she could find out where the door was. She could and see what was inside the walls, and what had happened to the old rose trees. It was because it had been shut up so long that she wanted to see it. It seemed as if it might be different from other places, and that something strange must have happened to it during 10 years, because that if she liked it, she could go into it every day behind her, and she could make up some play of her own, and play it quite alone, because nobody would ever know where she was, but would think the door was still locked in the earth. The thought of that pleased her very much. living as it were herself in a house with 100 mysterious closed doors and having nothing whatever to do to amuse her, had set her inactive brain to working and was actually awakening her imagination. Doubt that the fresh, strong, pure air from the moor had a great deal to do with it, just as it had given her an appetite, and fighting with the wind had stirred her blood, so that stirred her mind. In India she had always been too hot and languid and weak to care much about, but in this place she was beginning to care and to want to do new things. Already she felt contrary, though she did not know why. She put the key in her pocket and walked her walk. No one but herself ever seemed to come here, so she could walk slowly and look at, or rather at the ivy growing on it. The ivy was the baffling thing. However carefully she could see nothing but thickly growing, glossy, dark green leaves. Much disappointed, something of her contrariness came back to her as she paced the wall at the tree tops inside. It seemed so silly, she said to herself, to be near it and get in. She took the key in her pocket when she went back to the house, and she made up her mind would always carry it with her when she went out, so that if she should ever find the hidden door ready. Mrs. Medlock had allowed Martha to sleep all night at the cottage, back at her work in the morning with cheeks redder than ever and in the best of spirits. I got up at 4 o'clock, she said. It was so pretty on the moor with the birds getting up and the rabbits getting suns rising. I didn't walk all the way. A man gave me a ride in his cart and I myself. She was full of stories of the delights of her day out. Her mother had been glad. It all smelled so nice, clean, hot bacon, and there was a good fire. Shouted for joy. Oh, Dick, and he said our cottage was good enough for for a king. Evening they had all sat round the fire, and Martha and her mother had sewed patches on torn clothes stockings, and Martha had told them about the little girl who had come from India, and who had waited on all her life by what Martha called flax until she didn't know how to stockings. I'm sorry about all the mention of blacks. This was written long ago, and this was written in 11. So I'm just reading what the story says. They did want to hear about you, said Martha. They wanted to know all about the blacks that came in. I couldn't tell them enough. Mary reflected a little. I'll tell you a great deal more day out, she said, so that you will have more to talk about. I dare say they would like to hear about riding on us and about the officers going to hunt tigers. My word, cried delighted Martha. It would set 'em clean off their heads. Would they really do that, miss? It would be the same as a show like we heard they had in York once. India from Yorkshire, Mary said slowly as she thought the matter over. I never thought. Did Dick and your mother let you like to hear about me? Why, our Davy started out of his head they got that round, answered Martha. But mother, she was ever seeming to be all by herself like. She said, hasn't Mr. Craven got no gun nor no nurse? And I said, no, he hasn't, though Mrs. Medlock says he will thinks about it. But she says he mayn't think of it for 2 or 3 years, my governess, said Mary sharply. But mother says you ought to be learning your book by this time to have a woman to look after you. And she says, now, Martha, you just think how you'd feel yourself in a big place like that, wandering about all alone, and no mother. Did your best to cheer her up, she says, and I said I would. Mary gave a steady look. You do cheer me up, she said. I like to hear you talk. Presently Martha went out and came back with something held in her hand like under her apron. What does that thing with a cheerful grin? I've brought you a present. A present? Exclaimed Mary. How could a cottage full of 14 hungry people give anyone a present? I was driving across the moor peddling, Martha explained, and he stopped his cart at our door, pots and pans and odds and ends, but mother had nobody to buy anything. Just as he was going over Bethel and called out, Mother, he's got skipping ropes with red and blue handles. Pulls out quite sudden, Here, stop, mister. How much are they? And he says, Twopence. She began fumbling in her pocket and says to me, Martha, thou's brought me thy wages, lass, and I've got 4 places to put every penny, and I'm just going to take a tuppence to buy that child a skipping rope. and she bought one, and here it is. Brought it out from under her apron and exhibited it quite proudly. It was a strong, slender rope, blue and red handle on each side. But Mary Lennox had never seen a skipping rope. She gazed at it with a mystified expression. "What's it for?" she asked curiously. Martha, "does that mean I've never not got skipping ropes in India? I've got elephants and tigers and camels. No wonder most of 'em's black. This is what it's watch me." And she ran into the middle of the room, and taking a handle on each, skip and skip and skip, while Mary turned in her chair to stare at her, and the queer faces in the old porter at her too, and wonder what on earth this common little cottager had the impudence under their very noses. But Martha did not even see them. The interest and curiosity of Mary's face delighted her, and she went on skipping and counting as she skipped until she had reached up. "I could skip longer than that," she said when she stopped. "I've skipped as much as 100 when I was 12, but I wasn't as